Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Purpose Revolution call series. So today we're scheduled to talk with Chris Martenson, and we haven't been able to get a hold of him. We know that we're on his calendar, and we know he's got our info to join us, but in case he does, great. Otherwise, we're still going to attack this topic because it's a super exciting topic, and it's one that Chris has really thought long and hard about. I would say that like Chris Martenson and Charles Eisenstein, probably and maybe I'd say Russell Brand, Cornel West, even Bernie Sanders, are really kind of dealing with this collapse of the American dream, and more specifically, a collapse of our economy and our energy. This carbon energy thing, as well as our environment, and reinventing what it means to be prosperous. So, Chris's site is called Peak Prosperity. So if you want to go check out Chris and his work, it's peakprosperity.com. And the reason that we're having this discussion right now is that we now have new constraints. We have brand new constraints. So before there was such a thing as peak oil, peak phosphorus, peak water in a lot of places, we were operating under this assumption that Mother Nature was abundant, that literally there was an endless supply of stuff we could take out of the earth and an endless capacity to kind of put garbage into it. And that was the operating model for most of human history. And it was probably a perfectly fine operating model prior to the Industrial Revolution. So, I mean, I remember like reading beautiful poetry about throwing garbage into the sea, in the days before carbon fuels, fossil fuels. And people they had this like kind of deep reverence for the sea. Oh, she's going to wash it. She's going to take it. She's going to return it to a better use. And that was totally the case. When all you had was wood and metal, you can throw whatever you want in the sea. The sea will do just fine with it. It'll oxidize it. Same thing with throwing stuff out in the field. You could throw a sword. You could throw a bow and arrow. You could throw your garbage. It was all fine. It was all part of the natural carbon, nitrogen, and silicon cycles. Like this, it was all fine. We were all existing on the top of the earth and just kind of taking stuff from Mother Nature and using it and then burning it, throwing it away, and it was fine. But things started to change once we started to go deep into the earth for oil and gas and started to burn that, because that was introducing new carbon into our atmosphere. And so that's just one example about how now we've got all this new carbon in the atmosphere that's warming everything, rising the sea levels, and acidifying everything. So there's a new kind of environmental constraint. We're also finding that a lot of the things that we rely on as an economy are less abundant than we thought they were. We're finding that phosphorus is actually limited. There's not that much of it. We're using it up really quickly, and we're over the peak. So that each gram of phosphorus is more and more expensive. Same thing with oil. Each is more and more expensive. So Chris asserts this idea, and it's an idea that I'm really fond of, that prosperity and growth are mutually exclusive. So the example he gives is like, if you bring home $100, and you can either invest that in living deeply, so say like expanding your living room, or creating a walkway, or you can invest that in food for other people to eat, is essentially like to grow more people. And so what he's saying is like you're either using it for one or the other. And we have an economic system that requires continued exponential growth, not just continued geometric growth, exponential growth. And a lot of the graphs that he shows in his course, his beautiful course called Peak Prosperity, highly recommend you all check it out. The course is called Crash Course, and it's the 3 E's: energy, environment, and economy. And he basically shows that over the last 50 years, we've been exponentially rising. And like I said, that's probably a fine thing if we're not in a closed system, which we very much are. It's not that we're not going to space, it's just that there's nothing livable within, say, the time that we would need it if we keep burning through our rainforests and food and phosphorus and everything the way we're doing it. So Chris's work, and it's a work that I tend to agree with mostly. That it says that we need to re-examine prosperity. We need to hold it from a place of deep living as opposed to big pimping. So, in America, we have this idea that more is better. And that is true up until a point. Economists have found that up to, say, $30,000 in some places, $70,000 in other places, your happiness or your prosperity kind of ticks along with economics. But as soon as you get over that point, somewhere between 30 and 70,000, more money doesn't make you happier. More money does not improve your life. So the question is, given that so many people are below 30 or below 70, and so many people are above, do we need to have an economic system that rewards more? So I believe no. Chris argues some of the same things. So I'd like to share with you just kind of some of the things that he talks about kind of how he defines prosperity, and then how we can find our purpose within this context, within this definition. So the way that Chris talks about it is that it's really getting kind of intimate with basic human processes. So starting with Maslow, a safe, connected community. He really emphasizes having these strong communities where you walk across the street for a cup of flour, go next door for a cup of sugar, that sort of thing. Because these types of interactions tend to lead to not only safety but also economic well-being and psychological well-being. He talks about belongingness. He talks about these kind of rich communities where there's a small kind of group of folks. So instead of these massive urban centers that we have, it's actually kind of doing more with less. Going deeper with the people we love, going deeper with our neighbors, really kind of getting into their heads, and being a stand in their lives, being a force in their lives. And then in terms of self-expression, if you hold this idea that more is not better, so self-expressing currently under the default paradigm is if I get a new watch, I'm better off. Well, under this newer paradigm of prosperity, where we do it more with less, so you keep your watch, but you self-express from another way. You self-express from the truth in your heart, from your own purpose, whether that's through service, whether that's through art, time in nature, just being silly, telling jokes, telling stories. A self-expression is an organic thing. It comes from the inside. It comes from our hearts, not from something we pick up off a shelf or order off of Amazon. So these are some of Chris's fundamental ideas, and it really resonates with me deeply. Every time I see those T-shirts with the banjo on it or with the bike and it says "Live Simply," I'm like, yes, live simply. Not only, it's usually it's usually accompanied by live simply so that others may simply live. I've seen that as well, and that is definitely true. But it's more importantly to live simply because it's more enjoyable to do less, to actually spend more time, more intention to do less. This is where we get into this idea of the slow movement. So there's a beautiful book that came out called In Praise of Slowness. I think I have it over here somewhere. Yeah, by Carl Honore. And it examines this slow revolution that's happening. And a lot of it's starting in Italy, some of it's, I think, in Japan even. But it's this idea to do more with less, to have slow sex. Who wouldn't like that? To have slow cities, things that are more accustomed to the natural human rhythms, where they shut down in the dark and wake up during with the sun. There's obviously slow food. We've all heard about slow cooking. There's slow finance. Investing in companies as if you're creating something, not trying to exit out of it. And so all this is part of Chris's idea of prosperity, or at least tangentially related to it, where we're getting back to basics in a very profound way, where we're asking ourselves, what's our purpose? What's the purpose of our marriage, purpose of our family, purpose of our community, and just doing like the top 3 things well, just doing those few things really well. If a marriage can be defined as like quality time and appreciation and sex. Just make sure you get those things done, enough and in the ways that you need them. Everything else is tangential. The planning and the catching up on the Netflix series and the taking the trash out and all that kind of stuff. If you're not doing those three things, you're not serving marriage. So this is this is this broader definition of prosperity, and I would even add the second piece. So after the belonging and the self-esteem, we get to this place of self-awareness that actually becomes a good. That becomes a mark of prosperity, where we know who we are at our deepest level, and we're being that. And that is like, oh wow, that person is really comfortable in their own skin. They have a gravitas. They're fully integrated. They're full of self-love. They're giving themselves in service. They're balanced energetically. They can just as easily be loving, or be firm and set strong boundaries, or be questioning and playful, or be wise and analytical. They can just as easily embrace their feminine, be receptive and creative and nurturing, or they're masculine and be decisive and bold and protecting. So this is what we're talking about, taking this concept of prosperity and marrying it with purpose, because I believe purpose and prosperity kind of interweave at the kind of the apex of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, and then all the other models of human development, like Loevinger and Wilber's and Kohlberg's, and there's all these great models of human development out there, and I believe they really start to converge on this idea of kind of purpose, self-awareness, and self-actualization, because it really kind of like once you start to self-actualize as a human, you begin to self-actualize as in these broader collectives. You can actualize as a couple, actualize as a family, as a community. And because what we have inside reflects on the outside. If we can be happy in ourselves, we can be happy in all these other forms of cooperation. So in my, again, this is just my opinion, and I'm still waiting for Chris. If he comes in, great. I want to have this discussion with him too. But that purpose work is so fundamental, because it allows us to order our psyches, to learn all these different pieces of who we are. It's so fundamental, and it represents these kind of higher stages of evolution. I would say that the only thing that kind of is beyond that would be enlightenment itself. So this kind of idea of like complete spiritual union, where there is an abiding loss of self, where you're just kind of pure being. So the question now becomes, we've got this purpose revolution going. We've got Planet Purpose and the 21-day Purpose Challenge, and you got Chris's kind of prosperity revolution saying like, hey, we need to revisit what is actual value, like what actually serves the human experience, what serves ecological biodiversity. And we have this idea like, so how do I reconcile this? So I know my purpose, and I know what my gifts and my being are, like my things I'm good at and the ways I like to be in the world. But then I have this other reality where I've got all of these economic, ecological, even social constraints about what I can do. So it's a rabbit hole, right? If doing more with less is kind of this new definition of prosperity, well, how little is little? Is doing the most then kind of killing ourselves or killing a bunch of other people? It's just so there's more resources for other people, or are we kind of getting narrowing in on these kind of prosperity units of measure? Is a moment such a thing that can be measured as even being prosperous, meaning purpose aligned, or unaligned? So as we start to do our purpose work and embody this and take it out into our world, and it meets up against all these important constraints that Chris's work talks about, we suddenly find ourselves almost in a kind of a Buddhist place, where we are embracing this idea of right livelihood, given all these constraints. So in the Buddhist time, there weren't all those other constraints that we have. There wasn't ecosystem collapse, capitalism collapse, democracy collapse, all this stuff, financial collapse. It's probably, you know, coming soon to a stock exchange near you. So we've got this new idea of right livelihood. How are we as individuals fully expressive of the reality, this reality that Chris is talking about and other folks are talking about, that more is not better. We can't just buy our way or innovate our way or do continue this old model of just trying to create more stuff for more people to fix the problems from the last round of stuff that we gave them. We can't just do that. So how do we create this career that is prosperous in a true sense? So we have to start to look at the impacts of our careers, look at the impacts of our industry. Can it be argued that there are no purposeful careers in the oil and gas business? Potentially. Could it be argued that there's maybe no purpose-aligned or prosperous careers in the financial services business? That argument could be made too. It's not to say there's bad people working there, but just that if they had a broader or even more simple understanding of prosperity, they probably wouldn't do what they're doing. They're still doing this old thing around more is better. More profits, more growth, more market share, more, like this idea of growth. So as we start to cultivate our purpose in our career, we need to think about what are the impacts we have, and how do I create a system for myself, an economic system that brings in enough money or other economic inputs that doesn't compromise the constraints, the actual constraints of our global kind of economy, ecology, and political system. And a lot of these constraints are very real. Like burning carbon. If burning a lot of carbon is part of a job, that might not be the best expression of your life's purpose. So if part of your job is figuring out ways to reduce carbon or eliminate carbon, you see all these beautiful posts on Tree Hugger and everywhere else about folks inventing all these amazing contraptions to essentially live carbon-free, impact-free. So those would be examples of like finding your purpose, things you have to do, like solving problems or being creative or working in sales for one of these people. So being with people and inspiring people. You can find ways that are taking meaningful steps to create true prosperity, not only for yourself but for our species. So it gets us back to this concept of right livelihood, and it kind of all puts us all really in the place of being economists and philosophers, because if true prosperity is doing less with more, well, then we need to really think about what is happiness. What is the goal I'm trying to get out of this? Is it connection with a friend? Is it a better deal at the 99-cent store? Like what am I truly trying to get out of this? And is this thing something that is defensible? Okay, could I, would my grandchildren, my great-great-grandchildren be happy that I decided to meet this particular human need by hopping in my SUV and towing a boat to the middle of nowhere to burn a bunch of gas for fun? So these are the types of questions that kind of puts us all in this very mindful place that we live in a new world with decreasing resources, and we've got this new possibility of purpose to get more out of them, so we can have more meaning, more quality of connection with each other, because we know who we are and we know what the purpose of all these relationships are. So there's no simple rules. There's no kind of perfect system for everybody, but we all have to be in that question. And I think a noble and needed task is to figure out what are these new means of economic and political cooperation that honor this, these peak conditions that Chris is talking about. That honor kind of peak oil, peak copper, peak phosphorus, that honor these ecosystem constraints that we're having, toxicity everywhere, water tables lowering, and seas rising and acidifying, and extinction rates and cancer rates. We need to come up with some new economic models, and I think there's some old ones that are still quite worthy of exploring. And I want to start with the micro first, and then I think that is it's really just the hippie commune, with just 5 or 10 acres of arable land, and folks just literally living off the land, with their primary kind of output or value to the rest of us as culture. So, maybe they're not splitting atoms or solving cancer. They're just living simply, and maybe creating some great bluegrass music or some arts and crafts, or just kind of dwelling in the richness of what it means to live as humans in a community. Um, so I think that's worth exploring. I think another purposeful, prosperous model is the worker-owned cooperative. So some of you may know about Mondragon, but it's a very large Spanish cooperative, and they've got business lines across many industries. And one of their primary success metrics is employment. They're trying to give people livelihoods, fair wage livelihoods, and they've been enormously successful. They're one of the largest companies in Spain, and they've got a great story because they exist. They exist to do good things, but to do well for everybody. So I think we might start to explore more of these worker-owned cooperatives instead of one or two people at the top getting everything and everyone else kind of eking out tiny little increases. Where there's a more kind of shared commitment, shared genesis story, shared risk, shared reward, where we all get to do well. I think that's really important. I know that I feel more prosperous when my friends are prosperous. I don't want to be the only one doing well, and I don't want to be the only one doing poorly either. Like how do we create economic models that are more generative? And maybe that includes national income. Maybe it includes a deeper social safety net, so that people can pursue things that matter to them. They don't have to take a job for healthcare. Don't have to take a job to just like not be homeless. That's another kind of more macro picture to explore. So that does kind of bring us to what is the purpose of an economy. Some will say purpose of an economy is to structure how we invest economic surpluses. So, if I work 8 hours a day and that supplies me 2 days worth of resources, that I've got an extra day of resources. And so it's the same thing with an economy. If an economy generates in 1 year 2 years worth of resources, sustainable resources, obviously, you got to be able to replace them at a sustainable rate. How do we invest them? And so this is where kind of politics and economy are one and the same, because we need to structure the economy so that the investment of our economic resources aligns with the survival and well-being of our species as well as our interdependent Earth ecology. So right now we have no such thing. I mean, there have been planned economies in the past, and they did them well given their goals. Obviously, most of them crashed after a few decades, but when they started, they actually did them quite well. They could make tanks really fast. They could build bombs really fast. They could build roads really fast because they literally put everyone behind it. And I'm not saying we need to do that, but I think we do need to be to function more. To function with more reverence about this idea of economic surpluses, because this is the benefit and the gift of human labor, generally speaking. Somebody gave their day, somebody's giving their life to create that surplus. And we're suddenly saying, hey, do it, whatever you want. Go buy a monster truck. Go do that thing. That makes no sense. Go watch WWE. Go do all these things that make no sense to our species. So, I think we do probably need to move to more of a democratic socialist understanding where there's a strong sense of like state stewardship over the well-being of the species, but it still allows for free enterprise. It still allows for normal folks to go out and start their own businesses, but the ends of those businesses have to serve the well-being of the whole. Like there's no such thing as a company that is not a social enterprise or is not an ecological enterprise. Like I think if we have this concept of a social democracy that only allows for B Corps, basically decharters everyone else. Like, you don't get to be in business anymore because you do not exist to serve the benefit of humanity. Coca-Cola, I'm sorry. Monsanto, I'm sorry. Nike, I'm sorry. You do not serve humanity. Like, to like really that sort of like strong stance around like who gets to exist as a company, because a lot of these companies are just doing terrible things. They're working against the scientific reality that Chris is talking about, the Union of Concerned Scientists are talking about, that NASA and the UN have talked about repeatedly. Can we as a species afford to give charters to companies, or allow companies to retain their charters if their charter is to make life worse for humanity? Should we be allowing a company to mine groundwater, add corn syrup to it, flavor it, and then sell it to somebody, knowing that the only thing that's going to happen out of that, they're going to get diabetes, obesity, and die premature death? I mean, should we be doing this? Should we be doing this? And that's a question that we need to start asking ourselves. So, I'm not sure how much longer we can go in this direction of just kind of letting this kind of laissez-faire attitude and letting corporations just kind of do whatever they want. I don't think. I feel like so much of the economy is a pointless consumer economy that isn't advancing the well-being of the species, that isn't educating people, isn't turning them on to their purpose, isn't making the air more breathable, the water more drinkable, the land more fertile. They're doing everything opposite. They're not allowing for humans to earn a decent wage and to have enough time to appreciate the fruits of their labor, to spend time with their family, to find their purpose, to engage in the arts, to engage in civic discourse, to be an active member of democratic society. We've got almost every single company is not aligned in that fashion. They're aligned to get more out of people than less. They're essentially, I mean, just by the virtue of how we've set up GAAP, the generally accepted accounting principles, where we put labor on the expense on the income statement. So it's an expense to be minimized. That's why we've offshored everything. That's why we've automated everything. We're trying to get rid of people. Our economy is trying to get rid of people. Whereas Mondragon, that's a different model. These worker-owned cooperatives, different models. These hippie communes, different models. They're not trying to get rid of people. They're trying to empower them, trying to give them an economic model that allows them to just merely exist and to thrive. So we need to start to like explore this intersection as our purpose comes alive. What are we participating in? Can we be a purposeful real estate agent that drives around in a car and helps yuppies buy a different house? I mean, is that such a thing? Can you do that within the confines of what is actually going on in our economy? I mean, I'd have trouble sleeping at night, but that's how I understand the world, though. So we need to keep these questions about what is actual success, what is actual prosperity alive, because it's not a given. GDP is not a given. GAAP accounting is not a given. We made all that stuff up. We could easily create new things. As has happened in Greece, where they created these barter networks when their economy collapsed. As folks all over are creating these hippie communes, they're creating worker-owned cooperatives. People are actively saying we're going to start cooperating in a much different way. So, if you're on a path of purpose and you want to start this process of living more truthfully, living in accordance with not only your own heart, what you're good at, what you care about, but within the confines of your deeper identity as in partnership, as a member of your family, as a steward for the future of your family, as part of your community, as a member of the human species who has a very, very long history and potentially a very, very long future if we start to act differently, start to engage this question of purpose and prosperity simultaneously to create careers in a political economy that rewards us for being truthful, rewards us for our honesty, for our authenticity. Like, yeah, I make this widget because I love this widget. I hate the problem that people have without my widget. That's what we need. We need 7.3 billion people operating from that place, making their widgets within the constraints of our biosphere, within the constraints of fair wages, within the constraints of just general human decency, allowing one income to work 40 hours a week to support a family of 4 or 6 or whatever it is, as opposed to 3 or 4 incomes supporting that same family, as we find in a great deal of the developing world. So that is the discussion of prosperity and purpose. I'm sorry we couldn't get Chris on the line today. I'm going to try to reschedule with him because I'm sure it'll be much more interesting when he comes back. Take care, everyone.